Welcome back. Where we left off last time, we created the login section and the user was able to log in, but we did not have a way of persisting our user token once we get it from the backend. So this is what we're going to be doing in this session. So all we'll be doing is receiving the token from the backend. Then once we get the token from the backend, we are going to store it in the application's local store. And as we said, we don't have local storage in React Native, so we will use the async storage. Then we will be needing to validate the token each and every time the user opens the application. They don't need to log in again and again. So all we'll be doing is simply validating that token that we have stored. So to take a look at what we'll be doing is this. So a user opens the application, they get a loader for validating the token, but they don't have the token. So in that sense, they'll be asked to log in. So then they log in. Unfortunately, maybe they say an invalid login password, so they'll get the error here. But if they put the right password once again, they log in, this should be cleared. Yeah. So yeah, so they are able to see the home screen, and then when they close the application and return back to it, they should not see the login screen. They should see the loader whereby the token is being validated. Then they should see the home screen. Yeah. So that's what we are going to cover today. So let's get started. If we take a look at our auth component for the login part, you notice that no more changes are needed here with regards to token persistence. All you are going to be doing is simply what you are doing before, like dispatching the action login. Then the action login will handle everything for us. So let's go and see the updates that are going to be needed so that the token will be persisted once the user logs in. So when we look at our actions, we are only going to add two things in our login action. So in the login action that was dispatched, the first thing that you are going to add is setting the user token. Okay, so we will receive the token from the server, then we pick it from the data, okay, and then we set it. All right. Then the other thing you are going to do is to dispatch the action to clear the toaster data. Should there have been any error notifications that the user had been maybe displayed with whenever they tried to log in and they had an invalid password. All right. So when we look at our server, and we are not going to delve into it much, all you need to do is this, like we receive the data from the server, and if we look at the login part, we'll receive the data as a token. Okay. So we use the token and then we set it on the client side. All right. So the other action that we have added is an action for validating our user token. So this is a new piece of code that we have here. So let's take a look at it. The first thing we are going to do is we are selecting the user token from the store. You remember this token that we just stored here? So whenever the user reopens the application, we will be selecting this token. Then this token, we send it to the server, all right? The server will validate the token. If the token is a valid one, this part will now be executed, which will be a success, okay? However, if there is an error, then we will be rejecting the response from the server, and that means the token is an invalid one, okay? So if we look at our server, all that's going on in the validate token section is simply this. We can return a 500 or we can return a 200. And when we return a successful response for the valid token, we are going to send a bit of information about this user so that that user can be displayed on the application. Okay, so that's just it. We have seen that we have two actions that we need for this whole loop of storing the token and validating the token to be closed. The first action that we need is an action for setting the token. All right. So we will receive the token. All right. Then we will just set it. And if it's a valid one, in this case, it's a valid because we received it from the backend. We just say the token is valid, so it's true. Okay. Then the other thing that we have added is these cases. These cases are going to actually help us go through that sequence of steps. The first step of validating token, in which case we will set the status as is validating token. Then the other thing is whether the token is fulfilled or rejected. So this bit of code will tell us this token was a valid one. So that means we have finally finish the step of validating the token, and we are going to set the token as a valid one, which is true. Okay. However, should the token be an invalid one, we are still going to set is validating token to false, so that the user is not stuck in that loop of please wait. Okay. Then the other thing we are going to say is that this token is not a valid one, and in that case the state will be updated on the token's validity. So when we look at our slides, the only two changes we have made are this part here, and the other change is this section here where we have added all these cases. All right. So the next thing we are going to take a look at is how to actually use this token that has been set, and actually use also the is validating user token status. So let's continue. If we look at our routes are what decide what will be displayed at what time. We have added two selectors here at the top. The first selector is validating token. The other selector is token is valid. Okay, so this is validating token is a status, a Boolean status on whether the application is still in that phase of checking with the backend whether the token the user has on their application is a valid one. And in that situation or in that state, all you are going to be displaying is please wait. All right. You can change this to be anything else, but I want you to note, like, we have now a new shared component. You remember how we are making shared components? So this shared component will just receive content. Yeah. And the content here is please wait. Then when the application finishes the validation, we will not show this anymore. We'll now show this section. All right. And then in this section, we also now start seeing that, wait, this token can be valid or an invalid one. So in the case that the token is a valid one, that is why we get to see our home component. Okay. But if it's an invalid one, we will see our auth component. And that's the best thing about the router with the React. Like, it's a conditional, like you either show this or not. So in this case, we are either going to show home or auth, and we cannot show both. All right. So that's just it. And then, for example, if the user logs out, that means we are going to invalidate the token and say the token is no longer a valid one, and we set it as empty. And then the state of the token's validity will now change from being a valid one and then to be an invalid one, in which case the auth component is what will be displayed. Okay, so when we take a look at our selectors now, the ones that we have been using so far are this one and this one. So these two, we have used them in our routes, and I believe that's clear. So the next one that we have added is the user's token. This user token will be used in so many parts of the application, such as making HTTP requests, maybe when sending information to the backend. And another classical example that we have already used it actually is in the action validate token. We selected it, and how are we able to select it? If you recall the thank API we talked about, and I believe it's somewhere here also, this one, this thank API, it gives you access to some of the common things that you can use. And one of those things that we are now going to be using is get state. So we are going to use get state to get the current state that is in the application. All right. And this state includes that which we have already saved. And what we have already saved in our case is a token. So we are going to select that token. Then this token that we have selected, we are just going to send it to the backend, and then we validate it. So that's where this select user token comes into the picture. So we will be using this one in so many parts. Maybe later on you can decide even in your applications to use it when updating user profile. It's really, really important. So the next thing we are going to see is how we actually get to persist this information that we have received from the backend, so that when the user closes the application, in this case, let's try closing the app in like fully. They close the app, they open it, they should not see the login screen again. They should see initializing, then they should see the home. All right. So let's see how we go about that. The question is, how do we get to actually persist this user token? Okay. If you recall our persisters, we have our user persister, and this user persister, what it does in this case, now we are going to tell it, okay, we want to persist the user token. All you need to do is to simply whitelist the user token here. So the job is done at this part. Okay, now the next part is adding this persist get component to be a wrapper around our application. Okay, so what persist get will do, it will actually take the store that has been persisted in our async storage, and then it will try and reconcile it with the received state, for example, from the backend. All right, so we see that we are passing in two properties in our persist get. The first property is the loading, which is a component, which is actually our shared component. The other property is a persister, and this persister, what it does is actually something really interesting. It simply creates a wrapper for persist store around our application store, and this persist store persister is what we are going to be passing in as the persister. This way the token itself, it will actually now be stored on the application, so that when the user now opens the app once again, they should see initializing, please wait, and then we are at home screen now because the token had been persisted from the previous login. All right, so that's it on this section. As you see, like it's so simple to set up the token persistence when it comes to React Native, and that wraps it up for the whole flow. So next thing you're going to be doing is to actually use the received data. That data is the full name and the email of the user, so that they can be displayed on the client. Okay, so I believe that's it. If you have any questions or comments, just leave them below. Always remember, you stop growing the moment you stop learning, and what you have learned, go further and teach others.